everyone, it's Alexander Robinson. Welcome to the channel, and this is my review for The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which is the fifth Hunger Games movie, but is actually a prequel based off the book of the same name. This story takes place 64 years before the events of the first movie. We follow a much younger Snow as he's attending university at the Capitol, trying to come up with ways to improve viewership for the 10th annual Hunger Games. So he's assigned to be a mentor to an incoming tribute from District 12, Lucy Gray, played by Rachel Zegler, and the two of them start to form a closer connection. He tries to get everyone in the Capitol to cheer on Lucy Gray, and it's basically, since it's a prequel, about his slow turn to becoming the villain that he ends up being in the original trilogy of books. So we have a new Hunger Games movie out right now. This was the franchise that basically kicked off the craze of young adult adaptations in the last decade. It's a trend that I don't think held up very well, and they haven't been all that good. But I actually really enjoyed the first two Hunger Games movies. I never read the books, and the first one mainly suffered from a lot of shoddy camera work to where you couldn't really make out the action. And that one was directed by Gary Ross. The second movie, Catching Fire, is my favorite of the series, and even landed on my top 10 list of the best movies of 2013. It was the first one directed by Francis Lawrence, who would pretty much go on to direct the rest of the franchise, including this new film here. And I really love that movie. Mockingjay Part 1 was okay, but I gave it the benefit of the doubt at the time because, look, it's part one of a two-part story. I will hold judgment until I see part two to really determine how I feel. Then I saw part two, and I thought it sucked ass. It was very clear that the only reason they split the last book into two movies was for money, because there was no way to justify having two adaptations of the same book. Which is why I wasn't overly excited for this movie right here, because Mockingjay Part 2 just really left a bad taste in my mouth. So going into this movie, I just went in with the best of intentions. Because Francis Lawrence did direct the best movie in the series, and he even admitted that splitting Mockingjay into two movies was a dumb idea, so I can't really blame him for the faults of that last movie. But in terms of this movie here, it's actually split up into three parts. Like there's a part 1, part 2, and part 3 title card for each act of the film. It's a nice way to evenly pace this 2.5-hour plus movie. And when it started, I was really into it. I thought it had a fantastic look to it, a very retro 50s vibe, considering that this is a prequel set 6+ decades before the first movie, and it features a lot of the political commentary that made me invested in those first two movies. How the Hunger Games were pretty much created to punish those who would rise up against the Capitol. And most of the actors do a fantastic job of selling me back into this world again. You have Viola Davis, who is pretty much playing Amanda Waller's methed out sister, but she's good. That's not me criticizing her at all. It's just the way she looks is kind of ridiculous, but she is a terrifying character and incredibly ruthless. Peter Dinklage is really good as Professor Highbottom, and the second I heard that name, I turned into a minion from Despicable Me 2, where I just giggled nonstop. But putting that name aside, he's quite menacing and pretty ruthless to Snow. He's basically the type of character that Snow ended up becoming when he's played by Donald Sutherland in the later movies. Though if I had one issue with Peter Dinklage's character, is that he probably gets some of the absolute worst dialogue in this movie. There's a lot of pretentious dialogue throughout, and maybe that comes from the book, but he gets some of the absolute worst lines. Do you hear that? It's the sound of snow falling. That line was in the trailers, and every time I heard that, I just rolled my eyes because of how stupid it is. But I also just hate the way this scene is shot when he delivers that line. Like, the camera is just right up in his face. It's bizarre, but he's good regardless of the problems with the script. And Rachel Zegler continues to impress me as an up-and-coming actress. I like how this character, Lucy Gray, is the complete opposite of Katniss, where she's willing to entertain the crowd, and she's just a little more in your face and not as restrained or introverted as Katniss is. And we get to hear more of her singing talent, which, if you ever saw Spielberg's West Side Story, you know how excellent she is when it comes to singing. And when we get to the 10th annual Hunger Games, which actually came a lot sooner than I thought it would be, I thought that would be the big finale, It's intense. It put me on the edge of my seat just as it did in Catching Fire. It's ruthless. There's a lot of moments where I just felt really bad for some of these tributes that died. The only thing that I wish they did with this movie was that they actually went for that R rating. I always thought they should have done that with The Hunger Games to begin with, but I get making the first few movies PG-13. They're based off young adult books, so you want to try to bring in that young adult crowd. But by this point, this is the 5th movie based off the 4th book. Hunger Games has a locked-in audience, and that audience is about a decade older since the film series started. It's not really a major criticism of mine, but I feel like they could have gone for the R rating, especially considering that movies like Joker, Oppenheimer, and Deadpool have brought in millions of dollars despite being rated R, with Joker making over $1 billion. As long as they made a good movie with this, I don't see any problem with making it rated R. And for the first 2 parts, I thought it was a really good movie. And then we get to part 3. And this is where the movie starts to fall downhill. Part 3 has a big issue in the sense that it feels like a completely different movie. It's a different setting, there's so many other plot elements that come in pretty much out of nowhere, and there's a lot of stupid and inconsistent character decisions. You may have noticed that I haven't even talked about Tom Blyth, the actor that plays the younger Snow. And that's because I thought he was fine. There were a few parts in the movie where I thought he was pretty good, and other parts where I thought he was completely flat. But between parts 1 and 2 and part 3, it feels like he's a completely different character. In parts 1 and 2, you get the impression that he is trying to do the best he can to ensure Lucy Gray's survival, and you can tell that he has some sort of disdain for the Hunger Games. While he thinks there needs to be order, he thinks the Hunger Games themselves are inhumane. It feels like he just completely abandons that with no explanation by the time we get to part 3. And one part of the movie that really irritated me about his character, without spoiling anything, he rats on another character, knowing good and goddamn well that that character is going to be severely punished, and then once the punishment is carried out for that character, Snow feels awful and breaks down crying. I'm like, dude, you knew this was going to happen. Don't pretend that you didn't see it coming. And then the movie just abruptly ends. Much like with the ending of Mockingjay Part 2. Something big happens. We don't get any explanation for what exactly happened, and then the movie just rushes its ending. And I thought, wow, that didn't leave a good taste in my mouth. So I'm actually conflicted on how to actually rate this movie, because the first 2 parts basically make up the first half of the film, and I really dug it. And then part 3, which is basically the second half of the movie, is so lame and so sloppily put together that it basically ruined the whole thing for me. So I don't hate it per se, but I just think it's okay. It's not the movie that's gonna win me over back to this franchise. And as far as I'm concerned, there are no plans for another movie, because only one prequel book exists right now. So I don't know what the future holds for this series, but for me personally, I'd say watch at your own risk. If you're a diehard fan of this series from the start, then you probably already saw it, you probably liked it, and nothing I said in this review is going to stop you. But for any casuals out there, you'll really get a kick out of the first 2 parts, but as soon as the title card for part 3 shows up, you are more than welcome to leave that theater, go get some lunch, go see another movie, or just go on with your life. Because that second half of the movie just ruined the whole experience for me. And there you go, that's my review for The Hunger Games, A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Now I want to know what you guys think about the movie. If you've seen it, what did you think? Whatever the case may be, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell button to get notifications. You can also follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Letterboxd, Threads. I'll see you guys in the next video, but until then, have a good day and take care of yourselves.